So our purpose here today is really to talk about climate solutions mostly. So I want to preface these remarks by saying we're not here to debate climate science. Climate science is settled. It's if anything, the scientific consensus internationally has been way too conservative, and in fact, climate impacts are accelerating at a much faster clip. And so we do have someone here who is an expert on climate science, though, Mike Clancy here. If you can maybe raise your hand here. So Mike is a local expert, and he will be available afterward. He's very tall, so you won't miss him. And you can go and ask your climate science questions. But we're really here to talk about policy and solutions. So that's going to be the kind of the meat of our discussion here today. So also I wanted to see, are there any other elected officials in the audience here? We could just give them a shout out. Any elected officials here? Please. Maybe introduce yourself. Awesome. Welcome.
Mayor of Monterey.
Welcome. Any other elected officials, public servants in the House? Okay, we want to just pay our respects. Oh, sorry. Yeah, someone stand. I'm half blind, so if you got to stand up, go for it. Awesome. Welcome. I've also been, I was suggested by the Citizens Climate Lobby to give a little shout out and acknowledge the Native Americans who used to live on this land. In particular, it was the Rumsen, the Amamutsen, and the Ohlone people. California was their home for many, many generations and millennia. And through, through the policies of our ancestors and others, many of them have been removed or their tribal lands greatly diminished. But I think we want to just pay respects to the people who really stewarded this land and this planet for quite a long time, and there's probably a lot we can learn from them. So I think it was really great to include that because it's something we don't often do. And before I pass the mic over here to Jimmy, I want to just talk a little bit about our work here at the Center. So there's been a lot so the Center for the Blue Economy, as you might imagine, is a very kind of marine, ocean-focused think tank that we have here that we're very proud of. We're going into our 10th year soon here at the Institute. And there's been a lot of talk at the international level in the U.S. about kind of this link between climate change and oceans. And in most policy, that usually gets kind of the short shrift. In fact, if you read the Green New Deal resolution, which I have read, and it has quite a nice opening salvo here on what we need to do, it mentions ocean once. The word ocean is once in 14 pages. So people like myself and others who are in the ocean community, we said if the Overton window is going to move and we're going to get real climate policy at the federal level in the United States in the next few years, the ocean community has to be ready with its agenda, or we're not going to really be taken seriously, because again, it's a much more terrestrial focused oftentimes. And so we figured Center for Blue Economy, probably a good place to lead this effort. So we're taking the best thoughts and minds from around the country, and we are in the process now of building a national coalition for what we're calling the Ocean Climate Action Plan, which has two dimensions. The first is to use ocean and coastal resources to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, so the mitigation side. And then the second part is to help coastal communities adapt to climate impacts. So it's a focused kind of effort, and we're going to have a big 3-day meeting in DC at the end of April that we're coordinating. Our goal is to then hopefully work with Jimmy's office in the second half of this year and other congressional sponsors, both Republican and Democrat, by the way. We've talked to a number of Republicans who are actually on board with most of the goals of this action, and to actually write a bill and have it ready for Congress next year. So it will be the first ocean climate federal legislation in U.S. history, and so we're working on that. You know, obviously it's hard to get things through Congress, as I'm sure Jimmy will tell us about, but if we don't at least start and have something that is a consensus document, then there's no chance. And so we're going to get ready, and obviously a plan B here will be if something doesn't move forward at the federal level, was to use it as a template for states like California, Florida, Louisiana, Alaska that have large coastlines, coastal economies, and might be interested in the work we do. So if you're more interested in that, please reach out to me after this session, or go check out the Center for the Blue Economy website. So with that, I want to introduce the congressman. So Congressman Panetta here is, he followed in the footsteps of pretty big shoes here with Congressman Sam Farr, who was our congressman for many, many years and was really an environmental and ocean champion, and actually supported a lot of the work that we do here at the Institute. And I think Jimmy is doing an outstanding job so far filling those shoes and trying to move things to the next level. He's already introducing some stuff on the climate front that is very ambitious, and like I said, I think we're looking to his leadership in his office for this ocean climate work that will really get into serious, fifth gear at the second half of this year. So without further ado, I want to, introduce the Honorable Jimmy Panetta.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that brief introduction and appreciate all the work that you're doing so that when, oh boy, can we not, I can't wait for next year at this time, let me tell you, when we introduce your bill, that's for sure. But thank you, Jason, Ted, Amy, Richard, Mike, thank you for all of your work. Look forward to having the discussion that we are going to tonight. And also want to thank the CCL, the Citizens Climate Lobby of Monterey County. This is a group that I think I've met with more than any other group in my 3 years in the House of Representatives. And it's a group that I want to meet with and I enjoy meeting with because they do things in a way that is legitimate, it's respectful, it's dignified, and we have a very educated discussion about what is important right now with our environment and with dealing with the climate crisis. So thank you to CCL for all of your advocacy. I appreciate that. Let me also take this time to thank the Center for the Blue Economy at the Middlebury, I'm dating myself, Middlebury Institute of International Studies, as well as the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And thanks for all you do, everybody here, for coming out tonight to promote what we need to do when it comes to the climate crisis. Now, I was just at the aquarium yesterday. I visited the aquarium. I visited the Portola Plaza Hotel. I visited the Happy Girl Kitchen restaurant over there in New Monterey. And we talked about everything they are doing to remove plastics from our daily lives, from the hotel rooms, from the dining rooms, to the boardrooms. And at each place, talking to each person, it's amazing to see the amount of money they're spending and doing a lot of things and showing a lot of passion to get rid of single-use plastics. And what you realize is, yes, there may be a simple ordinance here in Monterey to do that, but there's no county law, there's no state law, there's no federal law to remove those plastics. And it reinforced in me that when it comes to taking those steps like that, to protecting our environment, damn, we are so lucky to live in this area. Because what we have is that there are so many people to take those extra steps and make that grassroots effort to work from the bottom up. And boy, is that needed now more than ever. Having grown up here, what you realize, though, it's just what we do here on the Central Coast. From businesses getting plastics out of our oceans, out of our food chain, to past legislators, you bet, like Sam Farr, who did a hell of a job getting oil drilling out of our waters, and from the CCL working to get carbon out of our atmosphere. We understand that it is up to all of us to ensure that this is who we are, not just as a community, but we have to do it as a country. Now, it's easy to stand here in front of you in this beautiful area and say this. We understand that. I think every single person in this room feels that. We do live in the most beautiful place on earth. And that's right. We understand that, but that there's also sort of an arrogance, an attitude that comes with that. And I admit it can actually get me in trouble sometimes back in Washington, D.C. In fact, when I first introduced myself to the Democratic caucus, right after we got elected in November 2016, I said, my name's Jimmy Panetta. I represent the 20th Congressional District on the Central Coast of California, the most beautiful place on earth. I didn't get that response, okay? I got a lot of boos, I got a lot of hisses, to which I calmly responded, I guess you've never been to the Central Coast of California. But like I said, it's easy to say that, it's easy to be like that because of the treasure chest of jewels that we have here, from the beaches of Santa Cruz to the Big Sur coast, from the National Marine Sanctuary and the National Estuarine Reserve in our front yard to the Pinnacles National Park and the Fort Ord National Monument in our backyard. We have the great bounty in our agriculture, and yes, we have the great beauty in our environment. And people before us have done everything possible to protect it. But as we know, and as we are seeing, that's not enough. It reminds me, every time I think of the environment and the protections that are in place, it reminds me of a motto that my wrestling coach had in high school, in which he said, once you make your mark in the world, watch out for those with the erasers. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to the protections on our environment, boy, we've set down some pretty dark marks. But as you know, especially with this administration, there's a lot of erasers, there's a lot of Sharpies going on. But we have to say that looking back, we haven't always seen those in the White House be so against addressing something that's so commonsensical, like climate change. I want to give you a quote from a president and see if you can guess who it was. We have been too tolerant of our surroundings and too willing to leave it to others to clean up our environment. It is time for those who make massive demands on society to make some minimal demands on themselves. Each of us must resolve that each day he will leave his home, his property, the public places, or the city or the town a little cleaner, a little better, a little more pleasant for himself and those around him. Any guess? Bingo. Richard Milhous Nixon. Another quote from another president. As we develop the frontier of space, let us remember our responsibility to preserve our older resources here on Earth. Preservation of our environment is not a liberal or conservative challenge, it's common sense. Though this is a time of budget constraints, I have requested for the Environmental Protection Agency one of the largest percentage budget increases of any agency. Any guess? Reagan. Ronald Reagan. Exactly. Now, I wish I could give you a quote from our current president in the same light. Yeah, but I can't. But I do want to give you a little insight into what we're dealing with back in Washington, D.C., especially coming from this administration. Last week, we had the Office of Management and Budget Director, Russell Voigt, come to the Budget Committee, one of the three committees I'm on, and talk about the proposed 2021 budget. And apparently, I guess I was the only member of Congress who asked about climate change. And I asked a pretty simple, straightforward question. I said, Director Voigt, did this administration take into account climate change in any way when it came to putting together this budget for 2021? You know what his response was? No. And let me tell you, when you look at that budget that was just proposed by this administration, they did not put any thought about the climate crisis when it came to putting together that budget. This is a budget that eliminates clean energy tax credits and advanced technology loan programs. It eliminates NOAA programs, such as Sea Grant programs, the Coastal Zone Management Grants, education grants, and the Pacific Coastal Salmon Recovery Fund. All of the programs that have been consistently funded by the U.S. government. It eliminates the Global Environmental Fund, which helps developing nations meet the goals to deal with climate change. And yes, when it comes to the EPA, They've proposed budget cuts by 26%. That's $2.6 billion with a B to the EPA. This is after the administration continues to recklessly dismantle regulations that keep our air and our water clean and safe, as Richard will talk about later. And it even removed the words climate change from the EPA's 4-year strategic plan. This is what we're dealing with. But we know that because ever since 2017, these are the types of actions that we've had to contend with. We've experienced an administration committed to erasing protections and the progress that we've made in protecting our environment. You remember the first 3 months that this administration was in office, they took 3 executive actions to infringe upon our national marine sanctuaries and our national monuments in order to extract oil. They're trying to do the same with our federal lands here on the central coast of California. They revoked the Clean Power Plan. They attempted to revoke rules limiting methane gas. They rolled back auto emission standards. And yes, we are now the only country to declare our intent to withdraw from the Paris Climate Accords and disavow our global commitment to fight the climate crisis. Doing all of this, as we are experiencing, all of us are experiencing the effects of climate change. With a record amount of flooding, fires, and hurricanes. In 2019, ladies and gentlemen, there were 12 disasters in this country that cost us over $1 billion. In 1980, there were 3. So much so that tomorrow night, I'm having the director of the California Insurance come here to Monterey so that we can talk about why these insurance companies are pulling out of Monterey County because of the wildfire danger. We're having that conversation tomorrow night with Senator Bill Monning. Last year, as we know, it's getting warmer because global CO2 emissions have hit a record high. Yet the administration is moving forward with a plan to eliminate the installation of technology to detect and fix methane leaks from oil and gas facilities. Last week, we broke a record down in Antarctica, 64 degrees in Antarctica. Now look, I think we understand and we know that the Earth is a tough old thing. But the human race on this Earth is not. And we will not survive the effects of climate change if we continue to go down this path, as you all know. By displacing millions and disrupting farms relied on by billions, with wells that are drying up and with floods that are filling up low-lying places. The climate crisis is not a problem that we can continue to put off. It is here, and it is now. And any delay means that we will suffer more harm and face more costs. The longer we take to curb emissions, as CCL knows damn well, the longer we take to curb emissions, the greater the dangers, the sparser the benefits, and the larger the risks of calamity that we face. It's no wonder that there are angry, frustrated, and scared people. It's no wonder that we have teenagers that are willing to come out here, put themselves on the line, and stand up in front of all of us and protest. It's no wonder that a 17-year-old climate activist is Time Magazine's Persons of the Year. It's no wonder that 82-year-old Jane Fonda gets arrested every week on the steps of the Capitol, as she was doing before she had to go make a film. It's no wonder that all of you are here tonight listening to 5 people talk about the climate crisis when you could be home listening to 6 Democratic candidates not talking enough about the climate crisis. Yet despite there not being a debate about the climate crisis, despite the complete failure of this administration to take into account climate change, I can tell you that this Democratic-controlled House of Representatives is not just talking about climate change. We are dealing with the climate crisis. In the House of Representatives, of course, we said yes to the Green New Deal. But under the leadership of Speaker Pelosi, under the sage, wise, experienced leadership, thank God, of Speaker Pelosi. I can tell you that right now. She knows that we can't just stop at putting forward a 14-page non-binding resolution. You need to have actual meaningful legislation. We know that you can't have gatherings of people outside on the steps of Congress. You need to have hearings in the halls of Congress. We know that it's more than just about yelling about goals. It's about finding a pathway to fulfill those goals. So yes, despite the inaction of this administration, I am seeing in Washington, D.C., in my Congress, nothing but action from the House of Representatives to demonstrate our intent to lead and prove our commitment to deal with this climate crisis. And we've done that by creating a whole new committee, the Select Committee on Climate Crisis, led by Kathy Castor, who've held 16 hearings on the climate crisis and will be coming out with a major piece of legislation on how we deal with the climate crisis next month. And in other standing committees, including the 3 that I am on, Ways and Means, Budget, and Agriculture, other committees in the House of Representatives have held 80 hearings on the climate crisis just in this past year. We passed the Bipartisan Climate Action Now, the first bill addressing climate change in over a decade, which ensures that we follow through with our commitment, and if we pull out of the Paris Climate Accords, we are not going to pay for it. I helped author that bill by adding an amendment that demonstrates to the world that the United States must take a lead in the international participation when it comes to this effort in dealing with climate change. We passed 3 bipartisan bills to ban oil extraction off the West Coast, off the Florida coast, and in the Arctic National Wildlife Reserve. We passed the Green Act, tax incentives to boost renewables and reduce our carbon footprint. We passed my Green Bus Act, dealing with giving tax credits for electric and hydrogen fuel cell buses. I introduced my California Central Coast Conservation Act that bans all new drilling on federal lands here on the Central Coast. Now, we've had measures that ban drilling here in the counties in this district, but those measures don't apply to federal lands. And so me and my federal capacity made sure that there is now legislation to prevent drilling in federal lands. We introduced the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, a bill that puts the onus on the plastic producing companies to come up with recycling programs, not the local entities, not the local taxpayers. They need to take responsibility for it. That's what this bill says. And we passed, and it was signed into law, the bipartisan United States-Mexico-Canada trade agreement. Now, I know you're probably saying, why the heck are you mentioning a trade agreement? Well, let me tell you, that was the most environmentally progressive hemispheric trade agreement in the history of all trade agreements. And what I mean by that is when this administration first presented it to us, it was unacceptable. But the Democrats, under the leadership of Speaker Pelosi and Chairman Richie Neal of the Ways and Means and the Trade Subcommittee of the Ways and Means, which I'm on, fought back. And let me tell you, in this deal, there is over $400 million that go to environmental cleanup, infrastructure, and enforcement, mainly on the Mexico-California border. Let me rephrase that. $400 million from this administration coming to California for environmental cleanup, okay? That's what this comes down to. And as you know, there have been the introduction of many bills to reduce our carbon output. We know that there are record amounts of CO2 continuing to spew into the atmosphere. The UN reports that by 2030, at a minimum, we have to cut our carbon output in half. And according to leading economists, as CCL knows well, the most effective and efficient policy to reduce emissions and address climate change is by putting a price on carbon. I introduced a bill that does just that, the Climate Action Rebate Plan, a bill that puts a price on carbon, $15 per metric ton of CO2 that is spewed into the air. That will reduce our carbon output by 55% by 2030 and 100% by 2050. It then also takes that fee from that carbon output and it invests it. 70% goes to the people who are going to be affected by climate change, and that fee the most, low and middle income families on a monthly dividend. It then uses the remainder 30% to reinvest in research and development, to reinvest in having climate resilient infrastructure, and reinvest in technical job training for those men and women who are now working in fossil fuels and need to transition into the green economy. It's that type of holistic approach as to why I introduced that bill. But as you know, and why all of you are here tonight, there is so much more that we need to do. With a fee that can reduce fossil fuel consumption, we can transition away from coal with renewable energy. We can decarbonize transportation and manufacturing. We must help developing countries build green infrastructure to meet growing power needs. And yes, we must end subsidies for fossil fuels. We must keep on increasing our global renewable energy capacity. We've grown that by four times in the last decade. But we need to continue to invest and improve that technology so costs go down, and we need to improve drastically our ability to store that type of energy. We have to figure out a way to remove greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, be it through conservation, be it through restoration, be it through improved management practices in agriculture, in foresting, and in our wetlands. It's a lot. We understand that. It's a hell of a lot. But I do believe this can happen. Why? Why am I so optimistic? I get it. I know you're asking that. Because of what I've seen. Because of what I've seen, not just in our nation's capital, but because of what I've seen in the House of Representatives, in our Congress, with this majority, with this leadership who understands what it takes to pass bills that can be very controversial, but boy, are they needed. But more importantly, I believe that we can do this because of what I've seen, not just in Congress, but right here on the Central Coast. Yes, because of the people that have come before us and have put those protections in place and the big shoes that they have made. But also by the people that are in front of me tonight, all of you, and that the people who are coming after us. And what I mean by that is today, I went and interviewed with, over at Mission Park Elementary School, a bunch of about 5 fifth grade young girls wanted to interview me about the environment. And it was lunchtime, and they could have easily been outside with their friends, farting around like I was in that age. But instead, they were filming a video questioning me about what they can do to help protect our environment. It's those types of conversations that give me faith. Yes, from the conversations with those 5 happy elementary school girls to the chefs at the Happy Girl Kitchen. It's those types of conversations that make me proud to be from here. It's those types of conversations that make me proud to protect this place that I have always called home and we call home. And it's those types of conversations that motivate me, and I'm sure motivate all of you, to fight for this planet that we call our future. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Congressman Panetta, for that very inspirational kind of opening. And I'd like to now introduce the rest of our panel here. So to my right here is Amy Wolfram, and she is the California Ocean Conservation Policy Manager at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. To her right, please. To her right is Ted Terrasas, who's the Sustainability Coordinator at the City of Monterey. And then to my immediate left here is Richard Stedman. He's the Air Pollution Control Officer at the Monterey Bay Air Resources District. All right. So I think I'm going to start, Jimmy, with a question for you. And the way we're going to do this, again, I have a couple questions prearranged for each of the panelists, and then we'll have a larger discussion, and then we'll take the Q&A, and we'll go from there. So Jimmy, you know, your bill, I know it hasn't gone to a full vote yet at the in the House of Representatives, but it's like it's going through committee and kind of you know, that process. You know, obviously the House of Representatives, democratically controlled, so we could pass this without bipartisan support, but in the long term, we're going to need Republican support here. So do you expect any Republicans are going to vote for this bill? And then the second part here is, it seems the real sticking point for most Republicans is any type of fee on carbon, right? Anything that's looked at as a tax increase on the fossil fuel industry. And so if your answer is that Republicans probably aren't going to support this because that's really the centerpiece of your bill, what are the ways to attract Republican support and independent of a kind of a new tax structure?
Yeah, look, I think, thanks. Thanks, Jason. I think you're right. I mean, the CCL bill, which is a very good bill, has one Republican member, and that's Francis Rooney, supporting it, who is retiring this year. And so what you realize is that there is definitely an antipathy and an aversion to getting on to these types of bills from the Republican Party. But I also believe that it's exactly the pressure that we've seen throughout this country is why that the Republicans, as you saw last week, introduced 4 of their bills. Now, none had, you know, a carbon fee, okay? But there was the planting the trillion trees and things of that nature where they definitely stay away from the fee, but they're looking at other areas to do it. I just don't think that any of the pieces of legislation that they talked about actually cuts our carbon emissions as significant as we need it. And I think we understand that. And it's going to take constant pressure to continue to make them realize that this is exactly what is needed. Now, we're going to continue to have these conversations, but ultimately, it takes leadership. And yes, you can have these civil discussions and have that civil discourse, but it's going to take leadership in making sure that these Republican members are not afraid of the person in the executive branch who will come after them. And that's the issue that, unfortunately, we're dealing with at this point. And so I think, once again, it's going to come down to making sure that those Republican members, this Republican president, is held accountable for not moving and actually setting us back when it comes to dealing with the climate crisis. Trust me, I don't like coming up with this conclusion, but ultimately that's what it's going to be, is when people like you get out to vote and hold your representatives accountable for not doing the right thing. Not just here in our blue bubble, but all across this country. Yes, the Central Valley, but into the center of America. That's what it's going to take as we go forward. Because I can tell you, we can have discussions. I've had plenty of serious discussions when it comes to talking with Republicans about climate. We have the Climate Solutions Caucus, a bipartisan caucus that has people like Matt Gaetz. If you see him on Fox News, this is the guy who's on that caucus because he wants to talk about it. But it's finding our similarities as to how we can advance this type of legislation, similar pieces of legislation, to push it forward to make sure that they understand that it's the right thing to do when it comes to cutting our carbon output. It's not going to be easy, but you know, being in Congress is not easy. I didn't go there to be easy. I went there to continue to do what's right, and I think that's what we did with this bill, and we'll continue to push it forward.
Great, thank you. I think my next question here will be for Amy. Amy, you know, the aquarium is well known for its marine conservation work and obviously Seafood Watch. Could you tell us a little bit about the climate program and kind of the climate policies agenda of the aquarium?
Sure. Thanks for asking. So hello to everyone. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. So at the aquarium, one of the things we really try to communicate to our audiences is the ocean-climate connection, the importance of the ocean to our climate system. So the ocean provides us with oxygen, it provides us with food, it's our largest carbon sink. So how do we, as you said at the beginning, it gets left out of the discussion a lot of the time. So how do we make sure that the ocean is on the agenda? The ocean is part of the discussion for climate change. So we know that our ocean is a source of solutions, and so it has absorbed 25% of the carbon dioxide that we've emitted and about 90% of the warming. So a lot of what the ocean does is buffer the the problems that climate change has caused. And so we communicate those lessons in appropriate messages for different audiences. So we have 2 million people that come visit us at the aquarium every year, 3 million people on social media that we work with, and then we have our policymakers. We also have our students that come to visit us. So we tailor those messages to help inform the public about the benefits of the ocean and what it can do as far as climate change. So.
Excellent, thank you very much.
And let me just add, because being there yesterday and talking to Laura, who's in charge of getting rid of all your plastics, what I love are the stories that she has when people come in and they complain that there's no to-go cups, or they complain that there's paper straws. And it's at that point that she makes it a time to then educate them. It's that type of discussion that is going on, not just at the aquarium, but at Happy Girl Kitchen and at the Portola Plaza. And what you realize is, yeah, people, especially who are not from here, come here, see the aquarium, stay at the hotel, eat at Happy Girl Kitchen. They're getting surrounded, they're getting bombarded by people who are willing to educate them as to why it's important to deal with our environment and to protect our environment. So thank you.
Yep, it all starts with conversation.
Nice. All right, I think I will go now to Richard here. Some in the audience might not know about this, this issue with the Trump administration has repealed California's clean air waivers from the EPA that have been longstanding for many decades. And I would like maybe you could explain the significance of this act and what the current position of California is to try to get those waivers back.
Okay, well, we don't really have enough time, but thanks, Jason. First of all, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming out. And I wanted to thank Congressman Panetta for his leadership he's shown on this issue. And we're under assault right now. Just by a show of hands, how many people have heard of the waiver, the Clean Air Act issue? So, yeah, so you guys could probably educate me, maybe. But the simple fact of the matter is that we've had a waiver, and this was been going on for over 50 years now, that allowed California to establish its own emission standards for motor vehicle emissions. And this was necessary because in the Clean Air Act, which was actually authored by the Nixon administration, the Nixon administration actually started the EPA. We've had some incredible administrators of EPA that have been under Republican administrations. So this was huge, but it allowed California to establish emission standards for vehicles. And we just had to show that there was a compelling reason for that. And there is. We had a really bad smog problem in primarily Southern California, some of the worst in the world, some of the most, the largest population impacted by that. So we've been moving along really well these past 50 years. It's never been challenged. There's no method in the law to take it away, but it's been taken away. And it's just like that. That happened in September. It's gone. So California was anticipating this, leadership at the California Air Resources Board, and they started negotiating with automobile manufacturers to say, look, we're going to break with the administration. They're going to want to have a one-size-fits-all for the rest of the country and California, and they're not going to allow this waiver. So will you go with us? And these manufacturers are BMW, Ford, Honda, and Volkswagen. And they said, sure. They realize this is a global marketplace. They're competing with other countries right now to get to zero emissions vehicles, electric vehicles. And we can't make it. Number one, if we don't have this waiver, we can't set our own standards. The Trump administration's proposals don't get us any closer to meeting our clean air goals. Number two, when we have climate change happening, it's going to exacerbate the formation of pollution. And number three, I should say that we were attacked by the Trump administration for not meeting clean air goals. And they threatened to sanction California and take millions and millions of highway dollars away from us because we weren't meeting the goals that they are making impossible for us to meet by taking our ability to set standards away. But I digress. So I should just say we have the compelling need. Public health is really important, but all of you should feel really proud because under the waiver, we have done amazing things. We've led the way for the planet on vehicle emissions, and I've got a list here. I'm not going to go in great detail, but like for instance, 1969, evaporative emissions. We decided to put tight-fitting caps on the tank of your automobile, on the gas tank. That reduced emissions. We also cleaned up the plumbing, the gas delivery system. We went to the catalytic converter, and these were all resisted by industry. But now they're state-of-the-art technology used in vehicles. You can thank the California Air Resources Board for the check engine light, the little yellow light. That says things are not working properly. That's huge, so we can get at the problem before it becomes too significant. We've established low-emission vehicle standards. We've also done the advanced clean car work for electric and zero-emission vehicles and other alternative fuel vehicles. And this has not only benefited the citizens of California, but 13 other states and the District of Columbia have also joined on and have adopted California standards. They are in jeopardy of having that, that's taken away from them right now as well. In addition, the Trump administration is as soon as they can get their emission standards through OMB, they're going to put into effect the SAFE rule. The SAFE rule, you guys know what that is? Well, that's good, so this will be news to you. The SAFE rule stands for Safe, Affordable, Fuel-Efficient Vehicles. So this is a bogus claim by the administration that by deregulating California and by establishing a national standard, vehicles are going to become safer. So I don't know why that even matters, because we have the National Transportation Safety Highway Administration that deals with safety issues. You can make a light car very safe. The administration's take is that heavier cars are safer. By that logic, Teslas are one of the most safest cars because they have huge batteries in them. So it doesn't make sense. Number two, affordable. Is there anybody, for a second, that believes that if car companies don't have to meet more stringent emission standards, that all of a sudden their cars are going to become cheaper? That's not going to happen. Studies have shown that's not going to happen. And fuel efficient, the administration points out that the cars were not doing enough to help California and the rest of the country with carbon emissions, which is partly true, but we were on a glide path because the law requires us to do things in a reasonable and feasible manner. That's now taken away from us. So we've had all this is being taken away from you. And so we have these 4 vehicle manufacturers now that have signed on with California and say, we'll go with you, we'll meet your proposed new standards. And guess what happened? The Trump administration sicked the Department of Justice on the California Air Resources Board and having them investigated for antitrust violations. These automakers came on board on their own volition. They were voluntary compliance. They said, we recognize that we're going to be ahead of the game if we can make more cars efficient. So my hat's off to those 4 manufacturers. The problem is now California is going to rule out incentivizing the other manufacturers that have joined the Trump administration. I'm talking about Toyota. They have a lot of electric vehicles. I'm talking about Chevrolet. And then we have Nissan with the Leaf. So those probably are not going to be included in California's fleets, and they're not going to be incentivized. So we're reducing the universe of electric vehicles that are available. And I don't understand why these manufacturers decided to go with the administration. But that's a huge deal right now. You should be all concerned about this because, frankly, my national association in the California has a lawsuit against the administration. They're saying this is illegal. There's no provision to be able to do this. And a lot of red states are going along with California in suing the administration because this is a states' rights issue. This is the federal government that is touting cooperative federalism, saying, we want you to figure out your problems and address them with your own resources. The feds will help out where they can. But now they're saying, no, you have to comply with a national standard. This is crazy. It makes no sense. And we knew immediately when the administration came on board that the oil companies and the auto manufacturers have joined on to make this, and I can understand they want to have one standard for all of the country. That makes sense to me too. And what we were seeing is California was leading the way, and most other states have adopted California's standards. And as soon as they start having a pollution problem relative to vehicle emissions, they are in line to adopt our standards. And we've seen that time and time again across the country. So this is unprecedented. So look forward for more lawsuits. I think currently California has 30 going against the administration environmental lawsuits. So I'm not sure That's not something to applaud, it's unfortunate. So we have a lot of challenges right now, but I think California has always been a pioneer, and we will continue to do so, even if we don't have a supportive administration. In the past, most administrations, Republican, Democrat, they were happy to let us lead, and they would follow. But now we have an administration that wants to lead and tell us how to do things and how to address our own problems. That's fundamentally wrong.
Thank you. I'll just say also, like, we seem to be winning most of those lawsuits, so that's at least good so far. So last but not least here, Ted will bring us back to local level here. And so Ted, you know, as head of the sustainability efforts in the city, could you tell us about what's going on at the local level? And I'd like to break it into two parts. One is what the city is doing with its own infrastructure and buildings and kind of own, you know, climate goals, and then what it's asking of its residents through its policy.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you everyone again for coming out tonight. This is it's great to have this conversation together and bring this notoriety to these issues and bring them more to the forefront. But yeah, as the city, we've been doing quite a bit. I was actually the first sustainability coordinator for the city. I started about 8 years ago. So I'm the best sustainability coordinator the city's ever had. I'm also the worst, but I go with the first version. So, but it's fantastic. Actually, it's really been, I was always worried coming here. I thought, you know, the city of Monterey, you know, it's the first capital. It's very old. And what if they don't want to do, you know, a lot of the new progressive stuff? You know, they have a lot of cool programs. What if everything's kind of a hard or an argument? And when I got here, I was playing catch up. I remember talking to my supervisor, and he's like, "You got to get an organics program in place. Like right now, we're already behind." Like he was, I was already running to catch up with what the city was doing. It was unbelievable. And one of the first things, or one of the important things we did a few years back, was adopt a climate action plan. And that was basically to kind of try to look at where we were in compliance with AB 32, which was trying to get us back to 1990 emission levels by this year, by the year 2020, and to try to figure out what kind of emissions do we have out there? How do you figure that out? Nobody really kind of knew. There weren't a lot of standards for doing that, so we kind of worked together with ICLEI and some other organizations to put a greenhouse gas inventory together and start figuring out where we were. And fortunately, based on the fact that we had done a lot of retrofitting, we were already switching to hybrid cars in the city of Monterey, and we had been part of the direct access program since 2010, which was, even back then, it was sort of a lottery program that allowed the city to choose a third-party vendor for our energy 10 years ago. So we were able to have renewable power for a municipal uses 10 years ago. So that was a fantastic jump towards meeting our 2020 goals, which we did. But looking at our midterm and long-term goals, one of the main things we looked at was joining a CCA, or forming a CCA as a group, a community choice aggregate for as an alternative to an energy provider, an alternative to PG&E, which was basically a way to say we could put our focus on completely carbon-free energy. That would be the base point, rather than just a bare minimum meeting, a 30% carbon-free or renewable standard that PG&E was offering as its base point. We figured we can do better. We can produce local jobs. We can start generating energy here, but we had to make that work with a lot of governments, it took several years of work. And Richard was a big part of that too, that guiding committee that made that happen. There's some other folks I can see out there, Tim Flanagan in the audience from the Monterey Regional Waste Management District. That was a part of that, a huge part of moving us towards getting to a place where we could all work together and form this group as a new joint powers authority, which really automatically basically flipped a switch saying we can go out on the energy market, prioritize carbon-free energy, and basically make every energy user in Monterey, San Benito, and Santa Cruz counties have carbon-free energy instantaneously, and use that going forward to say we can take the revenues from our energy ratepayers and put into projects locally and eventually start generating our power right here. So that was another gigantic cut to our greenhouse gas emissions that's setting us up very well. Yes. And thank you all, definitely, too, for your support and participating in that program, not opting out, seeing the value of it, and supporting us all. So thank you all very much for that also. But moving forward, we're kind of looking at how we can, we're, obviously pushing the envelope more, looking at transportation projects. How can we do a similar project working with other municipalities, potentially on a mass transit system, on electric buses, connecting our regions in a way that's a lot more greenhouse gas friendly, or looking at reach codes for passive home development to say, how can we start maybe building homes that are 90% more energy efficient? That way it's not just we're getting renewable energy, but we're creating a lot less energy demand on the front end. So a lot of that is really kind of forefront issues and on the cutting edge of what we're going to do in the next few years. And really, it's just, looking to your support, too, for your input, what you think will work, what you're willing to do. We've done a lot of programs in the city, like redeveloping Alvarado and other areas, Lighthouse, with new traffic control systems that ease traffic. On the Fremont, North Fremont area, there's bike lanes and things like that. So taking advantage of these programs, contacting us with what you're interested in, participating in Monterey Bay Community Power, and just day-to-day kind of choosing better ways to kind of how we can move around and operate in our community.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so I think before getting to the audience questions, I just wanted to give an opportunity for any of the panelists to ask a follow-up question to any of the other panelists. So you can talk amongst yourselves if you want to follow up.
I want to ask if you could just go into the leadership of Attorney General Becerra and where he's been on your efforts, if that's okay.
So California's Attorney General has been a beacon. He's really standing to truth and power with the administration. It seems like if you can think of a crazy idea, the administration's going to adopt it, especially if the Obama administration had some hand or fingerprint on it. And so he has been leading the way, and especially in the clean car arena. There's no way to, well, I should ask this, how you make a vehicle that gets, is there a control device that we have that will remove CO2? There is not. The only way to do that is by having more stringent emission standards, something we're going to lose. So he's fighting for us on that. I think we're going to win. I think the law is on our side, and I am very grateful that we have leadership in California that is willing to take this on. Otherwise, we'd roll over and things will get worse before they get better, and we don't want to go back to the problems we had in the 80s and 70s with respect to smog and carbon pollution. I mean, this is huge for California right now, and over 20 million people are impacted by pollution from automobiles, primarily in the Central Valley and the South Coast Air Quality Management District. Happy to report we're good here, but no, the state's leadership on this issue has been really a shining beacon, and we should all be proud that we're stepping up and we're fighting the administration on this. And there's unfair tactics that are being used against California. And I could go through, a lot of things like we need to rake the forests, or that we need to, manage our forests better when most of them are federal forests. And I should say this too, that, we are going to have more forest fires as a result of climate change. And that, for everybody in this room, not only is insurance going up, but your quality of life is going down. Because I don't know if you remember with the Soberanes fire, we lost several months over the summer and fall because of the poor and endangered air quality that we had. We were eclipsing what they have over in China. So we anticipate we're going to have more of those. We also have power shutdowns. That's a whole nother story. But we are going to be seeing more forests on fire. We're going to see more, and with warmer temperatures, the formation of ozone from precursors such as NOx, which is nitrogen oxides, and volatile organic chemicals. So we need to get on top of this. And climate change, we need to reduce CO2 going into the atmosphere and other global pollutants. So California is in good hands right now with our administration. We are a large economy. I think what we say matters, But I see a lot, it seems like it's personal retaliation and retribution on California. And it goes over in many other areas besides just the environmental area. And I'm sure Jimmy can tell you stories that I probably don't want to hear, but.
Any other questions for amongst yourselves? No? Okay, so I will go with the audience questions here. Jimmy, first one's for you. These seem like there was a significant amount of interest about the environmental kind of aspects of the new trade agreement. And so maybe you could take a little bit more about that, and particularly if there's anything related to climate in there.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think what you realize is that, and let me just go through some numbers here. I actually have some numbers. You know, look, this was dealing, thank you. This was dealing with an administration that obviously when you mention climate change, they shut down. There's actually, they will not do anything when it comes to that. And we saw it firsthand in our negotiations dealing with the USMCA. But that's why we had to basically push back and make sure that there were certain provisions in there, not just with labor, not just with our environment, but enforceability. And that's where a lot of the money had to go to. So we've actually, as part of this deal, we have certain attachés that are actually going to be there on the border monitoring the environmental standards. In regards to the amount of money, there's money going towards NOAA to deal with the overfishing that can happen on the Mexico side of things, as well as the Tijuana River cleanup. I don't know if any of you have ever been down there and seen that river. There was a delegation that went down there. I was unable to make this first trip, but I heard reports back of people came back and some of the members got sick from being close to that river. And so it's those types of areas that we knew needed to be a part of these negotiations. And fortunately, Robert Lighthizer, the United States Trade Representative, was very responsive in regards to our demands, and literally they were demands as to what we were going to have in that bill when it came to the environment. And so, like I said, it deals with the environmental infrastructure, it deals with the environmental cleanup, and it deals with the environmental enforcement, mainly along the California-Mexico border. And I do believe it's something that we should be pretty proud of.
Thank you. I think, Amy, this question will be for you. People were worried about, there's a lot of stuff in the local area here. They see plastic kind of single use everywhere, from Pebble Beach giving it out to all the golfers to the walls of plastic bottles at Costco. And they said there was even Andronicos was selling plastic balloons filled with helium right down from the aquarium, all for Halloween. And so they want to know kind of what can we do at the grassroots level to really kind of address the kind of the plastic pollution, which is clearly linked to fossil fuel use.
Great question. I think for a long time, we, especially here, have all thought, what can we individually do? What can we do as individuals, as a grassroots movement to do this? But it's really a lot bigger than what each of us can actually recycle or what we can do. And so at the state level right now, here in California, a little bit more of California leadership, there's two companion bills. One's called SB 54 and another one is called AB 1080. And they're to address this plastic crisis that we have head on, and to make sure that the materials that we have that we actually put in our recycling bin actually are actually recyclable. And so that is something around here. I think every municipality and Seaside is on its way, has passed their own single-use plastics ordinance, and I applaud you all for your grassroots efforts on that. Because of that, California is looking, and businesses are looking for some certainty to be able to say, like, Monterey has their ordinance, Carmel by the Sea has theirs, Watsonville has theirs, we're all doing it individually. So how do we start to actually reduce the plastic waste crisis that we have at a comprehensive level and make sure that the manufacturers and the people who produce this are actually making something that can be recycled? So that's we're working really hard at the aquarium on this legislation up in Sacramento. It was almost ready to pass last session. It got stuck, and there's a lot of industry that doesn't want this to pass. So we're working really hard to make sure that we can have a comprehensive way of doing this, but so that each of us doesn't have to go advocate product by product, golf by golf ball, mylar balloon by mylar balloon. What we have has to be recyclable or compostable. So that's one of the things we're really working on.
Great, thank you. If you could pass that to Ted. Thank you. Excellent. So Ted, some of the people are asking here, what, given, the amazing progress that's been made in Monterey, what is, what's the next step for really kind of big climate reductions that you see on the horizon?
Yeah, and as I mentioned a bit, we took a big bite out of our emissions goals with Monterey Bay Community Power and our energy, kind of a lot of where our energy use is commercially and residentially, that sort of thing. But really, when you look at our overall emissions portfolio, what you're going to see and what you're probably going to see in really any municipality you look at is transportation is a huge one. And so that's really where right now we're kind of turning a lot of our focus to and starting to maybe pull together regional talks about how, again, we can sort of work together, looking at electric vehicle charging and expansion. That's been kind of a lot more difficult than I thought. It's a lot more expensive. There's a lot of old wiring in Monterey, and it's a little bit difficult to get things up to par and kind of, find funding to do that. There's a lot of great programs and grants going on right now. So we're trying to take advantage of how to do that, how to kind of look at our areas such as the waterfront and putting up areas where we want people to, if you're coming from the Bay Area, and you have a lot of people that have electric cars, sometimes that's not the only car you have, so you kind of hang on to your old one just in case. It's kind of happened to me. Actually, they wouldn't give me enough for my trade-in, so I just hung on to it. But it's like sometimes people, if they're going a little farther, still get a little bit gun-shy maybe about bringing their electric vehicle because they're like, if it's going to be hard to charge there, or I can't find a place that's easy to do that, maybe we'll just take the, internal combustion car and, call it even when we go down and visit the wharf or Cannery Row or Carmel or wherever we're going. But if you're able to bring an electric vehicle down, you can get a charge there or at your hotel or at the wharf or wherever you're at, that kind of impact's going to diminish a lot more some of those transportation impacts from tourism, which is obviously, a huge impact. We get a lot of visitors, which is fantastic. How do we communicate, this with them and that this sort of charging is available to them. So that's another big piece of it. But really, transportation and how we move people, or maybe even how we start talking about our work days or configuring our cities so that we're not traveling as far to do things, where we can kind of live, work, and play in a shorter, smaller area, so that we're not, really that's a lot of what sustainability is about, is not having to reach out as far for everything you need or to throw things away far away, trying to deal with things a little closer by as much as you can, making those decisions that really kind of bring those decisions closer to home and really, have those impacts mitigated too, so that you're kind of dealing with the impacts of your choices and mitigating them as a community.
Thank you. All right, Richard, a question for you here. Many Californian cities are trying to go to 100% electrification of buildings because there's a lot of, natural gas that's used in the heating, both for the water and the forced air, and then obviously in kitchens. And so just wanted to know your position on that, what kind of incentives, and do you see that as a kind of a top priority for reducing emissions in California?
Most definitely. So here's the deal. Look at the lights that are on right now. Look at the cameras, the batteries that are powering them. We are very fortunate at this moment that everything that powers us is carbon-free. It's not all renewable because a big part of our energy portfolio under the Monterey Bay Community Power is carbon-free. About 35% is renewable. The rest is hydro electricity, which is not considered renewable, although there's no carbon emissions associated with it. So we've made the conscious decision to go without carbon. So we can feel really good about what's happening here. So if you want to go electric at your home, we also are driving down the rates. Right now, you'll be getting a rebate, and we hope to do better with Monterey Bay Community Power. As we get better long-term contracts with more renewables, this is where we need to go. And the same for electricity for mobile sources or our cars. About half the problem is our transportation sector, actually a little bit more in this area. So we need to electrify those. If everybody has an electric vehicle, it's not going to help congestion, so we have to do other things with transportation. But I had somebody call the other day and they were really smug saying, you guys are giving an incentive for people to purchase or lease vehicles, and that's true. Look at our website, mbar.org. We hope to continue. That's our crown jewel, according to my board. They really like that. You can stack it on with values from the state as well as the feds currently. I think that's going away, the tax credit. But right now, you can stack those together and get pretty significant reductions on the purchase or lease of vehicles. This is huge, and if you can do it, the power plant, this gentleman who wrote me said, well, this Moss Landing power plant is, they're putting out all this, they're spewing out fossil fuel combustion and all that. I said, they're, number one, they're not operating full-time. They're operating about 20% of their capacity because, you know why? We have a solar problem right now. That problem is we have too much solar. We have a glut. So, and I'm sure Jimmy knows this, we have the potential to have one of the world's largest battery storage facilities here in Moss Landing. It's under development right now. Tesla's going to partner. But we can capture some of that electricity, and these plants won't have to start up in the mornings or at the night when the sun goes down. And we can use that full time. So that's really encouraging as well. So Monterey Bay Community Power is huge. Yeah, and it's just going to be amazing. So we're making a difference already, and you guys should be really proud. So that means you can be sort of worry-free and not have a guilty conscience when you go out and buy that electric vehicle. The other side always likes to say, yeah, but fossil fuel powered that. It's not true anymore. 100% carbon-free is fueling our vehicles. Same for your homes. We hope to get electricity costs very, very much lower than gas costs. And as you know, we have a problem with gas storage. Look down at Porter Ranch area in Southern California. They were releasing the size of a battleship, the weight of an aircraft carrier per day for several months was leaking out of their storage facility, and that's methane, a very high global warming potential pollutant. So we hope to take care of a lot of these issues, and we're in a new age, so I would just encourage you to buy electric, convert to electric at your house, and things are going to get better. And we're trying to reach out to low-income people, too, that may not be able to afford these vehicles. We're putting used vehicles on the market for them to buy and lease. And then we're also hoping to put in neighborhood charging stations so they don't own their home. They can't just say we're going to open up the power box and put in a new charging meter. So lots going on, and we're working closely, the Air District, with Monterey Bay Community Power. Great things are happening and will continue to happen.
All right, thank you. All right, so Jimmy, there's been a couple questions about the nexus of climate change and agriculture, and obviously agriculture being, our biggest part of the Monterey economy. So if you could have a two-part question would be kind of what do we need to do to reform the agricultural sector to make it more climate friendly, and in particular, to help kind of protect farm workers who are really going to be the ones, facing the worst impacts, extreme heat, and that kind of thing.
Well, look, let me start with the second question first. We passed the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, a bipartisan bill that was one of the first immigration bills that we've had out of Congress in a long, long time that dealt specifically with farm workers, protecting our existing farm workers that are here. I admit, it was an immigration bill. We sold it as an ag labor bill, and that's how we were able to get bipartisan support, which is fine. But it protects our existing farm workers who are here, those who have come here to take the risk to come here and work in agriculture. I don't know if any of you, did anybody see the MSNBC, What's Eating America, on Sunday night? Where was the first place they went to? The salad bowl of the world, right to Salinas. They talked to some of those farm workers who are out there who deserve those types of protections that the Farm Workforce Modernization Act provides them. It also streamlines the H-2A process and ensures that those safety standards are in place for all farm workers. This was negotiated, our lead negotiators were the United Farm Workers Union. The UFW was right there at the table for the whole time. And it's a UFW-supported bill. So they understand how important it is not just to have the immigration protections for our farm workers, but also those safety standards. And another element of this is farm work housing. It puts $3 billion into farm work housing as well. Once again, this bill is passed out of the House of Representatives after an 8-month negotiation process. It's a bill I'm very proud of, not just for the substance, not just because it protects our farm workers, immigration-wise and health-wise, But it's a bill that was done in a way that I admit I don't see too often in Washington, D.C. Negotiations, rolling up your sleeves, sitting at the table, Democrats, Republicans, farmers, farm workers at the table, grinding it away for 8 months. To me, that's legislation. That's how you get things done. That's why we have a bipartisan bill that is in the Senate right now. Now, when it comes to what agriculture can do, we are very, very lucky to live in an area that, of course, claims the title of Salad Bowl of the World, one, but also has very progressive farmers, very progressive agriculture, people in agriculture, very progressive producers who understand that they need clean soil, clean air, clean water, just as much as everybody else. That's how they survive. And so what you're seeing here is a lot of producers who are willing to take those steps, willing to invest on their own in precision farming. Farming that deals with technology that focuses directly on the plant, fertilizer directly on the plant, rather than spraying it or spreading it, be it water or fertilizer. That's what type of people we have here in agriculture. And I do believe that if there is a big decision when it comes to climate, they should be at the table. They need to be at the table. They need to work with ways of how they deal with their coverages and their tilling, because obviously that's what releases a number of carbon, a large amount of carbon into the air. What type of coverage can they have? Can they switch certain crops, certain fields, and let it, grow over and not have to till it? But these are the discussions that we're going to have. And I can tell you that when it comes to Central Coast agriculture, those are the producers that want to be at the table, not to fight against, but to work with us when it comes to dealing with these types of protections, dealing with these types of regulations that, hey, look, they get it. They live in California. There's a lot of regulations here and a lot of hoops that they've had to deal with, but they do it because they know it benefits not just the people that eat their agriculture, the people that work in their agriculture, but the people that eat their food ultimately.
Great, thank you. And I do remember that bipartisan bill. I know that it was a lot of immigration in there, but kind of masked under the that was a great victory. So we're kind of coming to the end here. It seems like it's going quite quickly here, but I want to give everybody a chance to answer one of the two questions here, and we'll try to keep these brief. So again, choose one of the two here, which is either something for the California voters out here that you're particularly excited about for them to pay attention to in this upcoming election season. So if it's a bill or some type of legislation or a particular politician you think is really worth supporting, so that's part one. Or what you want to recommend is kind of a way to reduce a carbon footprint for individuals that you think people should be aware of. So take your pick.
I'll choose option 2. So that'll, I like my job. No, I'm just kidding. No, actually, I mean, a lot of, I think, what we're doing here, a lot of folks ask, what can we do, or what's the best thing to do? And really it comes down to your vote. Who you vote to represent you, for one, and how you vote with your wallet. What you buy, what you don't buy. Those two things are incredibly powerful, and people will listen to you. It's incredibly important that you express those and that you come together and you make those voices heard. I mean, I've seen a lot of changes at the government level, at the corporate level, that have come from people demanding changes in the way they do business. And a lot of corporations, people think of them as, just money grubbing, kind of evil, and a lot of times, they're more than happy that they don't really know what to do. They're kind of looking for our help and saying, what is the best way to do this? Or there's so many regulations or in different places, I don't know how to comply with them all, what do I do? But a lot of them are very interested, and they do want to have a healthy environment. They do want to have a healthy community, and they do want to demonstrate that to their consumers. So those two things are very important, just being very conscious about what you're buying, what you're doing, how much waste you're producing, how much waste you're not producing, and where is this coming from, where is this going? Even nothing's ever going to be perfect. Even when we buy an electric car, yes, that comes with impacts, right? You've got to get the metals, you've got to pull it together, that sort of thing. Of course, we're humans, we're here, there's 7 billion of us. We're going to have some impacts, right? But how do you mitigate that, and how do you make better choices every day? And I think that's what it comes down to, is when you're making a choice, when you're choosing who represents you, or what you're buying, what you're doing, how you're traveling, make the best choice possible. And then if it's not good enough for you, demand better options. Thank you.
So building off of what Ted said, yes, vote. Also, help people understand the ocean-climate connection. The ocean is really, we're here in a great spot. We are wonderful advocates. I think a lot of you know about it. If you don't know about it, there's an institution down the road that can help you learn about it. There's a lot of volunteers here in the room who will tell you about it. And help your representatives understand the importance of the ocean. And it's really not just for those of us who are on the coast. It's for all of us, and it really helps support all of us. And one of the things that I'm really proud about what the aquarium is doing is leading other aquariums in an aquarium conservation partnership at the federal level, where we're looking at legislation together so we can all collectively advocate together. So it's another way that we're raising our voice in order to help people understand that ocean-climate connection and its importance to us all. So I think that's really important. And then just as far as what's happening as far as legislation on the ballot, there may potentially be a climate resiliency bond that's on the ballot that you may want to look out for. It is in the process of gathering signatures, so we'll have to, and it's in the process of being negotiated, so it will take a little learning to make sure that it's the right thing, but it will cover fires as well as things like sea level rise. So that may show up on the ballot, and that's something that you can potentially vote for here in California in November.
Excellent. I'll chime in here, and I'll follow off on Ted's remarks here on the personal consumption habits. The number one sector for greenhouse gas emissions, greater than all the entire transportation sector combined, is the industrial animal agriculture industry, right? So the pork, the chicken, the milk and dairy, the emissions from that sector alone is more than the entire global transportation sector. So in 2020, there is never a better time to start making the transition to plant-based eating. And you don't have to go all out, you don't have to become vegan tomorrow, but make that transition, start experimenting. That is my recommendation. I've been vegan 30 years now, and it's the best thing I ever did, and so come talk to me if you want to learn more about that.
Okay, I'll just be really quick here. Combustion is the problem. I'm looking at Tim Flanagan, the general manager for the landfill. Actually, he's doing a great thing by combusting landfill gas and creating energy, because he's taking methane and converting it into CO2, which is less potent as greenhouse gas. But in general, why is combustion bad? When you burn wood or fossil fuel, it has carbon in it. When that burns, it produces CO2 and other nasties. Most of our atmosphere is comprised of 70% or more of nitrogen gas. You produce nitrogen oxide under combustion conditions. That goes to produce smog and ozone. So we've got to get away from a combustion economy. That includes our transportation sector, so electric vehicles, and also in your house. Having a gas, I love to cook. Gas is great, but there's induction stoves now that are out that supposedly are better. And the problem is, if you're cooking in your kitchen, you're exposing yourself to toxic pollutants in the air inside your home, unless you have a really good system to evacuate and exhaust those emissions. Combustion is bad. Let's get to solar and renewables. And I think that's going to take care of a lot of our issues. And once again, California can lead the way in that.
Let me just say something real quick about Richard. I introduced a bill, the Clear Creek Recreation Act, that opens up total about 80,000 acres down in southern San Benito County, 20,000 for wildlife protection, 60,000 for recreation. And what I liked is that Richard took the time to come in my office and talk to me about some of the issues he had. He didn't just snipe at me, he didn't do it in a way that was online or anything like that. He actually came in, and as you can tell, he's very methodical in how he presents his argument. And let me tell you, these were the exact same arguments that we ran up against in Washington, D.C. this year. And so it makes me proud to know that we have a guy like this here at this level, basically teaching all of us how we can be better stewards and what we produce, definitely. But I think coming up on 2020, it's kind of, I'm ashamed to say this, but what's percolating to the top are a lot of the bills dealing with climate. Like I said, next month you are going to hear Kathy Castor's select committee on the climate crisis put forward their bill on how they can reduce CO2 emissions. You have my bill, you have the CCL bill, 763 with Ted Deutsch. And yes, like I said, before we left for break, you even have Republicans talking about climate, okay? And you have, I guess I heard Donald Trump was actually reading a book, they said, on climate. I don't know if you heard, no, I'm serious. No, I'm dead serious. No, they were talking to him overseas, and he's like, yeah, no, I'm reading a book on climate now. They then did a follow-up to the press secretary. What book was this? It was called Donald J. Trump, an Environmental Hero. And this is dead serious. And it was written by one of his supporters. So this, even though they're putting forward this type of legislation, even though the president says he's talking about legislation, ultimately what you heard is correct. It's going to come down to you to make sure that there are those legislators, Republican and even some Democrat, who are held accountable when it comes to dealing with the climate crisis. And like I said, it's easy for us here. And it's nights like this, it's days like I had yesterday, and conversations like I had yesterday at the aquarium or at the kitchen or at the hotel that make me proud to be from this place, because we have so many people that are so concerned with what we can do to protect our environment. We have to make sure that other people hear this message. And so if you know people in other parts of the country, talk to them. If you know people in those red states, let them know what's going on here. If you know people in states that we can take back, let them know. But it's going to come down to, like you said, to all of us to not just vote, but to make sure other people vote and are educated about your vote.
All right, thank you. All right. Well, I want to thank all of you again for coming out. We have a really engaged community. It's great to see. And to the Citizens Climate Lobby, let's give them a hand, all the organizers. And then again, one final round here for Ted, Amy, Richard, and our own Jimmy Panetta. Thank you.